Alright, in this video we'll be demonstrating the wire and synchronization of the T3 surface modules. Now this video can be used with any of our surface modules such as the T3s, the T4, the LM4 and the T6 modules. To start out, the surface modules have a 4-wire design. The red wire being your power wire, 12 volts, black wire being your ground, yellow is synchronization, blue is your pattern selection. Now, one thing to consider is that the yellow wire may not always be needed. Again, your yellow wire is your sync wire. Now, typically the yellow wire would only be used if you wanted to sync a pair of surface modules together. In other words, if you wanted them to alternate flash patterns or flash together simultaneously. Now, here's an example to give. This is usually a big question. Is say you make a purchase for 4 surface modules. Say these 2 are going to be placed in the front and then 2 are going to be placed in the rear. Now, when it comes to synchronization on these modules, you wouldn't want to necessarily sync all 4 together. What we typically recommend is just sync the 2 that's going to be on the front of the vehicle and then sync the 2 that's going to be on the rear of the vehicle. You really wouldn't necessarily want to sync all 4 of them together. Now, to go with, let's start out by going with just one surface module. So let's take this one out. If you've got just one surface module, again, remember, you red your power wire, 12 volts, black being ground, blue being your pattern selection, and yellow being your sync wire. Now, if you don't really care about syncing multiple units together, then you don't have to worry about the yellow wire. If you're just using one surface module, the sync wire wouldn't be used at all. So let's take for an example, you've got one surface module that you're going to install at whatever location you decide. To start out, what you would do is we're going to have our red wire, which is going to be our 12 volts, and then we have our black wire, which is going to be our ground. Now, when it comes to doing the wiring on these, for the ground wire, there's no reason to run this wire all the way to the battery. Just find you a good ground, bare metal, and mount this to. More or less, you will be installing this in a location that a grounding source will be nearby. A screw, a bolt, anything like that would work. So once we apply the ground, then our unit will come on. The unit itself, if you wanted to cycle to the next pattern, all you would need to do is to take your blue wire, which is your pattern select, and you would just touch it to a ground. Let's move this one out of the way. Touch it to a ground for about a second and then lift off. So we're just going to touch to a ground, and now we can cycle to whichever pattern we choose. And you can continue cycling to patterns until you find the one that you want to use. Okay, so we've got one surface module. That would be your how you would choose to do one surface module. Now, with the pattern selected, there's no reason, after you decide the pattern that you want and you don't intend on going to another pattern down the road, then there's no reason to use this wire anymore. You can just simply clip it, or if you wanted to cap the end off, if down the road maybe you decide to change the flash patterns, you can have that ability. But if you're doing a permanent install, that's the pattern you want to go with and stay with, then you can just simply just cut this wire off and be sure to cap the end of it so it doesn't hang around and touch the ground and then change your flash pattern for you. Now, if you bring another surface module into the equation and you decide, okay, you want to use 2 surface modules and you want these 2 to sync between each other. Well, if you were to just take, let's see here, if you were to take the 2 modules, let's put the 2 grounds together, let's put the two power wires together. If you put them together and then you apply your 12 volts in power, the units may or may not be synced between each other. Sometimes they may flash together, sometimes they may alternate. Now, because we don't have the two sync wires together, eventually these units, as they're doing now, they're going to start to offset as they're doing now, because the two, what we usually like to say, cannot communicate amongst each other. See how that now they're flashing together? Using the sync wire will allow the two modules to essentially, quote, talk to each other, so they know which flash pattern they're going. When it comes to doing some of this stuff, when you're running your wiring, you may not necessarily want to immediately tape everything up. Leave some of your wires hanging, just so you can be able to get to it. So once you get the units installed to wherever location you want, you can still access the wiring until you finish this step. So let's say we've got the units installed where we want them, and we'll remove our power. So we've got the units ground to wherever we're going. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the two yellow wires. These are our sync wires. We're going to tie them together. Now, when these units are going to stay in sync with each other, these two wires have to be connected together at all times. Now, you may end up taking, of course, a longer piece of wire to conjoin the two together, but they always want to stay together because they need to be able to, quote, communicate together. Now, once we've got them grounded, we've got our power wire ready, and we've got our sync wires that are attached. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put power to them. Okay, so we've got power running to them. Now, at this point, since they're synced together, these two will not start to conjoin patterns together. In other words, as you saw before, where they started to offset a little bit and then they were flashing together, right now they're not going to do that. They're gonna stay in sync with each other. Now, if you want to choose another pattern for them to flash or alternate, all you have to do is take one of the blue wires. It doesn't matter which one you choose. It could be either module you want, and just touch it to a ground. Again, it doesn't have to be the ground that you originally chose to do the black wires to. It could be any ground, any bare metal that you want. All you would do is simply just touch it for about a second and lift off. Now, when it comes to selecting the pattern that you want to choose for them to alternate amongst each other, not all flash patterns are going to be able to be synced with each other for alternating. So what you want to do is just find the pattern you want to go with. So of course this one's not even close to alternating together. So we're going to hit it again. Now we have an alternating pattern. From this point forward, these units will stay alternating amongst each other. They will go back and forth. If you decide that this is the flash pattern you want to stay with and you don't want to cycle to another pattern, you're happy with these, you want them to stay just like this, then again, all you would have to do is take both your blue wires, cut them at the ends, and cap them off. Again, be sure that you cap them off. Cap them off if you want to take a piece of electrical tape, maybe kind of tie around it, may even put a zip tie to ensure that the electrical tape does not come off. Usually, a lot of times, we will take shrink wrap, put around it, and actually shrink wrap it so we can ensure the electrical tape doesn't come off. Because if these units were to just say touch a ground, then it's going to change flash patterns. Now, here's a flash pattern. If you decide that you want both modules to flash together instead of alternating, at this point they will flash together all the time. They will not start to alternate or anything else. We're going to touch our pattern wire to ground again to cycle to the next pattern. Here's another alternating pattern. Okay, that's a flash pattern that will not alternate or stay together. So we're going to cycle to the next one. Here's another alternating pattern. Okay, we want to continue forward with our pattern selection. And there's our alternating. So again, you can kind of cycle to the next pattern until you find the one you want to go with. There's several different types that you can choose to go with. But again, the biggest thing is when you decide that you want to sync two units together, you've got to make sure that the sync wires, the two yellow wires, are always together. At any point, if these two wires come apart and the lights are turned on, then it will revert back to, they're not going to be able to communicate to each other. Again, another question that's usually asked is, will it remember the pattern? Of course it will. If we remove power, let's remove power from here. Okay, if we remove power, so here's your on and off switch, so to speak. You turn your lights on. Once you re-engage power back to them, they will stay alternating from that point forward. They will remember what was the last flash pattern you chose. If you have any questions regarding the installation or the wiring on these, simply give us a call or shoot us an email and see what we can do for you.